Good evening, everyone. Greetings from AOC and Web Academy. This is the third season of AOC and Web Academy series, and this is a Friday series for pediatric residents and pediatricians. Today we have a very interesting topic on which is almost a hot burning topic, that is autism spectrum disorder. And we have none other than Dr. Praveen Suman to deliver this talk. And Dr. Praveen is a renowned developmental and behavioral pediatrician working currently at Sir Gangaram Hospital. She is a renowned developmental pediatrician. She has a lot of expertise in dealing with children with autism. And ma'am has done her graduation from, she's a product of Maulana Azad Medical College and subsequently got trained at MAMC. And she's very renowned in Delhi Circle and across India. And she is very renowned for care of children with autism spectrum disorder. So we are very happy and we are very grateful to Dr. Praveen that she agreed to speak on this topic of what is new in autism. So with these words, I would, on behalf of AOC and Web Academy, I would invite Dr. Praveen Suman to deliver her talk on what is new in autism spectrum disorder. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik, for the kind words. And as autism is a very close to my heart, so it is my pleasure that I'll be able to discuss this with you. And so today we'll be talking about autism, what is new in autism in regard to the diagnostic criteria, about the causes, about the comorbidities and the treatment approach. So if we go back to the history, Eugene Bleuler was the psychiatrist who gave first time the term autism, and it was derived from the Greek word that means autos, meaning self. But the use of autism came into current practice only when Austrian pediatricians started using this word, that is Hans Asperger, 30 years back. And it is Leo Kanner who gave the description of autism. And finally, in 1990, ICD-10 gave the definition of autism as a pervasive developmental disorder, which included a group of conditions characterized by qualitative abnormalities in reciprocal social interaction. Very importantly, understand the words qualitatively abnormalities, not the quantitative. So quality is abnormal when the child is interacting, reciprocal social interaction, idiosyncratic patterns of communication, and there is a restricted and repetitive interest and activities. And the definition also was given in 2000 by the DSM-4 criteria, which also defined the term pervasive developmental disorder, which was characterized by impaired social interaction, verbal and non-verbal communication, and restricted and repetitive behaviors. But now the current diagnostic criteria, what is being used, is given by DSM-5, and these are the latest guidelines which has to be used. So how it is different from DSM-4 we'll be discussing. Before that, I will just discuss the major criteria of DSM-5, that their autism spectrum disorder is a persistent deficit in social communication. Please underline the word social communication and social interaction, and that too across the multiple contexts. And along with that, there is a restricted and repetitive pattern of behavior. So autism is a neurobehavioral disorder where just social communication and repetitive behavior will occur. The symptoms should be present in early developmental period, but it has been seen when it is mild, it will not be manifested in early life. It may manifest only when the social demands exceed the limited capacity. So there is no age criteria that the features has to be present before 3 years or something like that. It can manifest even later on in life. Thus, and like any other disabilities, to diagnose a disability, it is very important there has to be a functional impairment in the child in terms of social impairment, occupational, or any other important areas of functioning. And These disturbances should not be explained by any other problem like intellectual disability or global developmental disorder. So I will just give you a brief idea about what was DSM-4 and DSM-5 and what are the differences. In DSM-4, the pervasive developmental disorder was a terminology which was used, and it was divided into 5 categories: autism, Asperger's, PDD, NOS, and CDD. But in DSM-5, there is no diagnostic subcategories, and research has shown there is a lack of reliability across the physicians if there are subcategories. So now it is a umbrella term which includes all children with clinical and subclinical autistic features, and they will come under the terminology autistic spectrum disorders. So it is a broader terminology now. And the requirement for diagnosis is it is a behavioral disorder, and you can take the history also into consideration if there is a past history of delayed speech and all those stuff. And these behaviors should be present. Earlier there was in DSM-4 there was qualitative impairment, social interaction, communication, but now no focus on social interaction. It is a persistent deficit on social communication and social interaction. So social communication is the communication in a social context. Sometimes children with autism do have language, they are communicating, they are speaking, but that's majorly a need-based communication. This is what you have to differentiate. They can have need-based communication, but social communication is impaired. That will manifest in the form that there is a deficit in social emotional reciprocity. That means there will be absence of conversational skills or to and forth conversation. There can be deficit in non-verbal communicative behaviors. Non-verbal means the body language, the eye contact will be poor, not making enough eye contact and not using gestures. And there can be deficit in developing, maintaining relationships. So poor peer relationship. There is difficulty in sharing of interest as well as sharing of enjoyment. So all these features will manifest in the form of social communication and social interaction. And earlier language impairment was considered as part of the criteria, but now language impairment is considered as a modifier. Is not in the diagnostic criteria. It is a specifier which I'll be discussing. There are few specifiers which you should be writing down when you are diagnosing a child with autistic spectrum disorder. The second criteria, very important criteria of autism, is restricted repetitive pattern of behavior and interest, which will be manifested in the forms of repetitive body movements, motor stereotypies, insistence of sameness and flexibility, ritual patterns and nonverbal behaviors, highly restricted interest, and strong attachment to or preoccupation with the unusual objects. So one must remember that this is all behavioral, and which can be present in other typically developing children also, but the quality is impaired. The child, the a typically developing child also will be playing with the car or with the blocks, but he plays in a changing pattern or plays in a make believe pattern. What the autistic child will do, he would like to play in a manner that he likes to play with the tire or wants to make the line of a thing. So they have a very highly restricted pattern of interest. And now in latest classification, sensory issues are also included as the behavioral symptoms. And very important difference now which has come in DSM-5 is that earlier we used to say the symptoms has to be present before the age of 3 years. As I told you, now it has been said that this can manifest even later when the social demands exceed the limited capacity of a child. So the presentation or diagnosis can be done at a later age also. And then functional impairment, has been told to you, is a very important criteria for diagnosis of autism, and it has also been classified into three levels based on the severity. Level 1 is where the child requires minimal support. Level 2 requires the substantial support, and level 3 requires a very much substantial support. And then there is a terminology called social communication disorder, which is also a new entry in the DSM-5. And in this, there is a problem with the social communication, but does not fulfill all the criteria of autism. Then we label the child as social communication disorder. If you are familiar with Asperger, so earlier what we used to call as Asperger is more like a social communication disorder now. Then comes the comorbidities. Comorbidities, earlier in DSM-4, they used to say that ADHD and stereotype movement disorders cannot be diagnosed with autism. So if autism has a hyperactivity, it is a part of autistic disorder. But now it has been very well specified that there are few specifiers which you have to indicate. For example, intellectual disability. So autism spectrum disorder child can have intellectual disability. He or she can have language impairment. So you have to write with or without intellectual impairment, with or without language impairment. Any associated medical or genetic conditions or environmental factors which has led to the problem should also be specified, because it will have an impact in the management of the child. And then associated neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD, which is very commonly seen. Autism with ADHD, autism with intellectual disability, and autism with language impairment. All those things has to be mentioned. So now we go to the prevalence. As we have seen, it has increased over few years. In 2000, the prevalence was almost 1 in 50, 1 in 150, and which has increased up to 2010 by 1 in 68. And the recent research has shown to the extent that in 2018 that it has increased to the level of 1 in 59. So what could be the reason that there is an increased prevalence? Some of the guidelines has been given is like either there is a broadening in the diagnostic criteria, because now it is a big umbrella term and we are taking care all the children with even milder symptoms and borderline are also comes under the diagnosis review of the autistic spectrum disorder. And now there is increased public awareness and acceptance. If I see my practice 25 years back, it was very difficult to label or diagnose a child with autism. There was not much acceptance and awareness, and people used to be very, very scared of the fact. But these days, parents are much aware. They've already read on the net and they are ready to accept the problem and ready to go ahead with the treatment. So, and another important finding is the recommendation of universal screening by the American Academy of Pediatrics. They have recommended at 18 months of age, all the children should be screened for the autism spectrum disorder using MChat tool, which is a screening tool and freely available on the net. And increased availability of early intervention services in the community has also made it, easily diagnosed and easily accepted. Then diagnostic substitution. All those children who were earlier diagnosed either with the intellectual disability or ADHD were not labeled as ASD. Now we can also give the combined diagnosis. So all these factors have been contributing to the increased prevalence of the problem. Then, according to the longitudinal studies by the First Word Project, the relevant information has been given to the clinician about the red flag signs for ASD. And they have said that there is not a pathognomic symptom which guarantees the presence of ASD. So there is no single symptom which we can label that this is ASD. And not all children with ASD show all the symptoms all the time. So sometimes you must have seen clinicians saying this child cannot have autism because I saw him looking at the eyes of others. So if a child is making eye contact for some time, that does not mean he cannot have a autism. Autism is the problem of social communication and social interaction with restricted activities. We have to understand it can be, it can have normal intelligence, it can have normal language, it can have few signs which are very, very typically developing child, but these two areas which are affected. And American Academy of Pediatrics has also given few symptoms which are which indicate that there is a red flag signs. For example, lack of pointing. Normally by 1 year child start pointing towards object. There is proto-declarative pointing, proto-imperative pointing. So there is absence of pointing in the children. If there is absence of sharing of interest, absence of appropriate gaze, or child is not able to respond to the name and has repetitive movements and poor communication skills, one must think of in terms of autistic spectrum disorder and do the appropriate screening and the detailed assessment. Then comes the etiologies. Etiology, various evidences have shown that there are genetic factors which are associated, both genetic and environmental factors has been attributed in the etiology, although exact reason is still not known. And it has been seen that autism is 50 to 200 times more prevalent in siblings of autistic proband than in general population. And the twin studies have shown that almost 36 to 96% in monozygotic twins can have a high problems than the dizygotic twins. And number of chromosomes and single genes on chromosomes have been implicated, and a lot of genetic research is required. And it has been seen that parents who have a child with autistic spectrum disorder, there are almost around 10% chance of having a second child being affected. And if 2 or more children are affected with autism, there are almost 32 to 36% chance that another child will have a problem. So this show a lot of genetic predisposition. And studies have also shown that there are other risk factors which are associated, like intellectual disability, Fragile X syndrome, tuberous sclerosis, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, neurofibromatosis, in number of cases, which also says that we need to look for the genetic basis. Then various environmental risk factors which has been attributed to the autism are exposure to medications like sodium valproate and thalidomide, short pregnancy interval, and maternal factors like multiple gestation, maternal obesity, bleeding, and diabetes. It has been seen in various studies that advanced parental age, both paternal as well as maternal age, has also been contributing to the to be a high risk factor. Then infections like TORCH and perinatal factors in the form of preterm, low birth weight, all these factors also make the child high risk for the, along with the genetic predisposition, makes the child high risk for the autistic spectrum disorder. The autism spectrum is understood to be neurodevelopment, meaning there are differences in the pattern of brain development. There are neuroanatomic and neuroimaging findings, but they are not diagnostic enough to say that, you know, these are the pathognomic of autism. But it has been seen that there is an increased cerebral volume that affects both gray and white matter in these children. There is clear difference in the function and structure of the empathy circuit. There are also difference in the connectivity between the frontal and parietal lobe function that are thought to be relate to the cognitive style. Then various biomarkers has recently been studied, and but till date none of the biomarker has enough evidence that this is a full marker of the problem. But I will discuss few of them. One is early brain growth. It has been seen that in children with autistic spectrum disorder, the head growth is on the higher side in first 2 years of age, that their head growth is almost on the 97th centile. But it is seen in almost 16 to 20% of children. So, you know, it has not been very important. But neuroimaging pattern on the functional MRI also shows the structural changes and the functional changes, which suggests that there is a difference in the autistic spectrum disorder and the typically developing child. Then electrophysiologic changes also shows problem with the auditory perception and the visual perception in children with autistic spectrum disorder. When the measurement of eye gaze has been studied in children with autistic spectrum disorder, it has been seen that there is a poor eye gaze between the 2 to 6 months of age. There is a deterioration in the eye gaze. So these are the early biomarkers, but still require a lot of research in this area, and other areas like melatonin levels and other levels have also been studied, but not well proven. Then various theories has been given for the impairment in social interaction. One of the very important theory is the theory of mind, which is which negatively affects the pretend play, empathy, sharing, and social and emotional reciprocity. And other theories are stimulus over selectivity and enhanced perceptual functioning theory. I will not go into the details because of the lack of the time. Now I will just discuss the diagnosis part. Once the presence of autism is suspected, it should be referred for a multidisciplinary assessment by a team of professionals, including developmental pediatrician, psychologist, special educator, occupational therapist, speech therapist. And the diagnosis is made on the basis of detailed history examination and on the basis of DSM-5 criteria, and then various scoring scales are also used to find out the severity of the problem, like ISA or childhood autism rating scale. But ADOS and ADIR still remains the gold standard for the diagnosis of autism. Then beyond the diagnosis of ASD, a diagnostic assessment should also be done about the functional problems, like what are the strengths and needs of the child and what are the skills and impairments. Then very importantly, it is to find out the co-occurring condition like sleep disorder, which is seen in almost 50 to 80% of the children. And it has a significant impact on the management of a child. If it is seen, then ferritin level can be done, which is treatable thing, has been seen in low in some of the children and helps in the treatment. And then sleep hygiene and melatonin are usually recommended, and if not done, then intensive behavior modification needs to be done. Seizure is very important, which is seen in almost 7 to 23% of the children with autistic spectrum disorders. And the high risk factors are for seizures are when there is associated intellectual disability or a female sex, or there is a lower gestational age. And they generally respond well to the anticonvulsant, and poor prognosis is seen when there is an associated intellectual disability. Then feeding difficulties is very, very common because of the multiple reasons, because there is a food selectivity, because of sensory issues, and they have aversion to certain texture or temperature, or they may have pica. So this may lead to a lot of feeding issues. And because of cultural values, parents also restrict certain constituents like gluten and casein, and all this can also lead to nutritional deficiency rarely. And it has been seen rarely in some children there is a vitamin A, D, and C deficiencies. GI symptoms are also common, like constipation and reflux. So, and which will have a significant on the behavioral pattern and the treatment of a child. So all these things has to be treated simultaneously. Other neurobehavioral disorders are ADHD, anxiety. As I told you, now we can make the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder with ADHD, and requires treatment separately in terms of medication and behavior modification. Then wandering. This is the most common cause of morbidity and mortality, aimless wandering. So it has been seen in almost all the patients of autism. And for example, a child who wants to play with the water and he remembers that the water was in the park, so he will run to the park and start playing. He does not have a concept of danger of the road and the water. He is does not have a social cues, so they are very prone for accidents, drowning, and elopement, which is very, very common in these children. So it is mandatory that we must prevent all these accidents and elopement by putting alarm system or by tying a GPS tracker on the child's on the wrist, which will help you to find out where is the child, about the child location. Then what are the investigations which are done? MRI is rarely needed. It does not provide any etiologic information and does not help in intervention. And it is indicated only rarely when there is atypical regression. We call atypical regression when there is when the regression occurs generally after 2 years of age, or after there are motor regression, or there are multiple regression. So MRI indicative if there is atypical regression, or there is associated microcephaly, macrocephaly, or seizure, intracranial manifestation of genetic disorders, or if there is any associated neurologic abnormalities. Metabolic testing is not recommended routinely until unless there are indicators for the metabolic problems. Genetic testing is very, very important. We must remember that genetic evaluation should be recommended to all the families. It should be offered for etiologic workup. Specific genetic workup is done when there is deceleration in the head growth velocity with midline movement. Then Rett syndrome or MECP2 gene should be tested. If there is marked macrocephaly with pigmented macule on the PEN-SPTN gene should be done. And if there are no specific markers, then chromosomal microarray is generally done. And it has been seen almost 5.5 to 12% have shown definitive diagnosis when we do the genetic evaluation, and up to 40% have shown indefinite diagnosis but have shown the findings in the chromosomal microarray. Then Fragile X screening, which is a very, very important and has a lot of genetic implication and is easily available, should be done for all the children, especially in boys. And if there is a family history of any family member with intellectual disability. And currently it has been seen that almost 0.45% of the autistic spectrum disorder cases shows full-blown Fragile X syndrome, and majority of them are girls. So it is important, Fragile X should be considered in all the children with autistic spectrum disorder, and it is easily available, and it has a lot of implication on the future pregnancies of the family. Then whole exome sequencing should be done in case we do not find anything on this, and genetic referral definitely should be considered. Then comes the prognosis. It has been seen children who have been diagnosed in less than 3 years of age generally retains that, on almost 80% of cases, they generally retain the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And only 9%, almost 9% of the children may after a certain time will not meet the criteria. So 9% may come out of this, and in almost 10 to 20% cases, they may turn into ADHD or ODD. So they may come out of the diagnosis. And it has been seen children who are diagnosed later on, after 3 years of age, generally have average or above average cognitive abilities and have a milder symptoms. And children with language impairment and intellectual disabilities are the one who have generally a poorer outcome. Then I will just briefly summarize the treatment part. I will not go into the detail. We will start from the bottom. The most recommended and supported by the evidence is the behavioral intervention. Various approaches have been given, like ABA, applied behavioral analysis, naturalistic behavioral intervention, and other behavioral interventions has been recommended, which are the most evidence proven treatment for these children. Along with that, medication is considered in these children for the comorbidities, and it has been seen in almost 50 to 60% of the children needs pharmacotherapy. It may be lower in the younger age group, but as the age advances in older age group and in the adolescent age group, they generally need medication. Then other therapies like auditory integration, sensory integration, and gluten-free are still under the research purview, and rest of the therapies like chelation, immunotherapy, and facilitated communication, secretine, and megavitamin, all these are not recommended and should not be done. So I'm just giving the guidelines. I'm not going into too much detail. So in the end, I would like to say that diagnosis and intervention is multidisciplinary, comprising of developmental pediatrician, neurologist, psychologist, and team of occupational therapists, educator, rehabilitation therapist. And the program which is given has to be behaviorally based intervention so that there is an improvement in the social communication skills of a child. And parents have to be trained for this, and we have to be aware of the false misleading claims for treating autism which has been given, like chelation therapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapies, and FDA highly cracked down on all these false claims. And we have to be sure that only the recommended treatment has to be given to children with autistic spectrum disorder. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen. That was an excellent talk. And it gave a very broad overview of the subject. And I'm sure the residents have learned many important tips on how to diagnose and assess and, at least suspect autism spectrum disorders when they see these children. So over to Dr. Kaushik.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Praveen, for delivering such a excellent capsule in half an hour. It is like full of information. Thank you very much, ma'am. Now we will have a quiz to be conducted by Dr. Ranjit and Dr. Ram. And after the quiz is over, then we will have the question and answer. So I would request all the audience who wants to post few questions to Dr. Praveen, please type in Q&A. We will answer Madam will answer all the questions once the quiz is over. Dr. Ranjit, Dr. Praveen, can you stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, sure. How to do that? How to do that? Sorry.
Ma'am, there is a green button.
Yeah, it's not coming. Wait, this is what I was looking for. Stop share. I think.
You've done. You've done.
Done now? Yeah.
Over to you, Ranjit, for conducting the quiz. Ranjit, are you there?
I'm not able.
That if the regression is occurring later in the age, or there is multiple regression, or there is associated motor regression, then we have to investigate. But generally for autistic regression, nothing can be done.
Thank you, ma'am. What is the role of DHA, and is carnosine helpful in autism spectrum disorder?
According to the latest studies, not yet, under research review. And if something comes up, but till date, as I showed in a small slide, that only recommended things are those, and other rest of the things are only research basis. If you want to give, just make the research protocol and do according to the protocols, not otherwise.
Ma'am, another very interesting question, which is a very commonly asked question, that what exactly is behavioral therapy? What do you exactly do in behavioral therapy? How is it to be done? So yeah. Can you give just an overview? This is like something which everybody wants to know.
In fact, I could have talked more on this, but we had a limited time. I will just give you a simple example. There is a term called applied behavioral analysis. This is the term by which we do the behavior modification. And this has a basic principle of A, B, C. A is the antecedent, B is the behavior, and C is the consequence. I'll give you an example. For example, if child is crying and he is asking for a doll, she's asking for a doll, and she's crying, and so antecedent is that she wants a doll, and the behavior is crying. And the consequence, if you give this doll to the child, that means the consequence is favorable. You have reinforced the behavior of a child. So next time, if the child wants that doll, she will again cry. You understand? So this is the basic principle. If the consequence is favorable, the chances that this behavior will repeat. If the consequences are not favorable, then this behavior will gradually decline. So this is how you work. So to change a behavior, you either work on the antecedent or you work on the consequence. So it is easier to work on the consequence, because antecedent, at times you cannot change everything, if what child is want or something is needing or something is lying over there, but consequence definitely you can change. So this is the basic principle of the behavior modification, that consequences change in such a manner that the child does those things which are positive, and the negative behaviors gradually wean off. So I've just simplified and told you, but this is a very, very intensive program. When we do it with the children with autistic spectrum disorder, you need to understand they have difficulty in social communication. They cannot even ask things. For example, if they have to ask, they cannot do this much also. They cannot have verbal as well as non-verbal gestures. So everything you have to teach with this technique. They've been taught. They are a good visual learners. Autistic children are generally a good visual learners. So you taught them, and with the prompts you teach each skill. For each skill they are doing right, you reinforce so that they do it again and again with repetition, and they learn those skills, and then those skills are used in journal environment. This is called journalization of skill. So teaching each skill takes a lot of effort, so it is not easy, but yes, by doing this you can teach these children very well, and they can do. A lot of children do improve, as we have shown you. Almost 10% children do improve, and 20% of children change from to different diagnosis. So there is earlier we used to say that once autism is always an autism, but now the recent study says 9 children does lose their diagnosis later on. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. One of the related question is, which is better, sensory integration therapy or applied behavioral therapy?
So these are two absolutely different. As this is a neurobehavioral disorder, there is no confusion. Behavioral intervention is the first line of treatment, is the mainstay of treatment. And sensory integration, latest researches have shown not very, very concrete results, but it is generally given. And in fact, when a lot of people are practicing, must be attending this workshop, they have a tendency ke OT ke paas chale jao, go to OT. OT does not have much role. As I told you, in DSM-5 also, sensory issues are also a part of the behavioral spectrum. So behavioral intervention is the first line of treatment. If there are sensory issues, this you can supplement it with the sensory therapies, but that should not be the mainstay of treatment, very categorically.
Ma'am, another burning question which always comes to the mind: how to diagnose and how can you prevent ASD in future pregnancy? One affected child and the parents are worried. How do you counsel them?
This is what I told you in the literature also. 10% chance that the if the parents have one child who's affected, then there are 10% chance the other child can be affected. And you can do the basic workup, genetic workup, which I have told you the flow chart also, that you, if there are specific disorders, you can look for them. If they're not, then you can go for the microarray and the whole genome sequencing. And anything can be picked up and can be prevented. That should be given. That should be offered to the child. So genetic counseling is a very, very important part of the autistic spectrum disorder these days. And we try to do, at least in our setup, we try to do Fragile X screening for most of the children. And we have picked up also, although it's not very high, as in literature also I showed it's 0.45%. But even in those families, I remember I had a family where 2 kids were affected. And when we did the Fragile X, it turned out to be positive after 2 kids. So if we would have done it earlier, then probably we could have prevented the second. So those things which can be prevented should be done. And parents should be advised, that should be given the option that there are 10% chances, that much risk they have to take. And if there are two kids who are affected, then almost 30 to 35% chances that the next sibling will be affected. So we have to be very, very careful in doing the genetic counseling and take the help of the geneticist if required.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. Another question is it better to care in medical home or in their own family in our setting?
Medical home means?
Probably the Dr. Achyut wanted to ask whether, I believe is it better to care them in the medical home or in the hospital or in their own family setting?
In the medical home, like, I'll try to explain. Like in our setup, there is nothing like medical home which exists. Either the child goes for the therapies to a therapy center or to the hospital. So there is no indoor kind of facilities available for these children. Outdoor facilities for therapies are available in various hospitals and various centers, which can be availed and can be given to the parents, those who can, those who want. But definitely parents have a very important role. And I've seen a lot of centers, what they do, they don't teach parents anything. They just try to do therapy on their own in a isolated room. Whatever they do, it should not be the practice. The behavior modification technique has to be told to the parents, and parent has to work for at least 35 to 40 hours per week with the child. That is the recommended therapies schedule. So if that much has to be done, the parents has to do. You cannot do it in a therapy centers. So take the help of professional, whatever and how much time you can take. And parent training module should always be there for the training of these parents. So home based is, especially in our kind of setup, home based is very, very important.
Ma'am, another question on Rett syndrome. A female with typical Rett syndrome but no MECP2 deletion. How do you approach?
I don't know what does that mean. If it is Rett syndrome, that means it has to be MECP2 deletion. And if it is not, then you have to treat the child as a autistic on the clinical function, clinical improvement. Whenever we are working with the child of autistic spectrum disorder, we have to work on 3 areas. One is the core features of autism, that is social interaction and repetitive behavior. Second is the functional impairment of the child, that we have to make the child as much independent as possible. And third is the problem behavior. Problem behavior is that whatever child, if certain children are hitting, crying, excessive crying, or bite, whatever is the problem behavior. So these are the 3 mainstay areas of treatment with children with autism. So any child who has Rett's and you are saying it turned out to be negative, it should not, if it is a Rett. So still you work on a clinical grounds in all these 3 areas, make the plans, teach the plans to the parents, and let them work with the child.
But probably I think the attendant wants to, the question person wants to know no MECP2 deletion. How do you genetically approach? I think what next investigation will you do? I perceive this. It's an anonymous attendee, so I'm not able to find out.
Probably, then we have to definitely take the help of, we have to go with the whole genome sequencing and all this thing. These has to be, we have to go with the detailed evaluation, definitely. If it is.
Another question is that can we follow universal screening as guided by AAP or modified to some context?
I have discussed this a lot of time with my IAP colleagues and all, but they are of the opinion that we cannot do it in our setup because there are not many early intervention services available. If we do universal screening and we pick them up, how will we help them out? So till the time we do not have an infrastructure to help those children, so implementing such program is a little difficult. But definitely those who can do, especially in private setup or in little better off setups, and especially in our, like, if I get a lot of patients, I should not be saying a lot of doctor patients whose children are affected. At least we should be using those who are aware, who can afford, who can do everything. Those should be given a chance. We should not delay. And it is the latest guideline says that American Academy of Pediatrics that any child at till the age of 12 years, anytime you suspect, even you suspect autistic spectrum disorder, you start intervention. You don't have to wait. So this is the latest. So early intervention is the key. Please remember and please intervene the moment you have a suspicion, even at 6 months, 9 months, 11 months. You don't have to wait for the diagnosis to be finalized. You can start the intervention so that we can, make the difference in the child's life.
Ma'am, your quick view on role of omega-3. We always ask you all controversial questions.
Controversial questions.
We don't ask you simple.
You want to know my opinion, so I don't get into this. I don't prescribe all this, and till the time it is not proven, rest is your choice.
Okay. Your quick word on pharmacotherapy in autism spectrum. Can you quickly just enumerate the times when you feel that medications are going to help?
Oh, number of times. And in fact, I must say that when you're working in a team, you see, as a pediatrician, your major role is more on diagnosis and on the medical intervention when there are others to help you out with the behavioral intervention and sensory and all the stuff. So I've seen earlier there was a trend that everybody used to say, don't give medicine. But now with opening of, with the experience and with so much of medication also coming in practice, and parents are also aware. Now we have seen medication has a huge impact, has a lot of role in improving the outcome of these children. Once you improve the hyperactivity, once you improve the aggression, once you improve the attention span of a child, it is so much easier to handle this child, the problem behavior as well as the intervention. So these children are very receptive, and it makes hell lot of a difference. So I have a very good experience with a lot of medication in children with autistic spectrum disorder. Mute.
Yeah, sorry, ma'am. What other medications do you use besides risperidone for anger issues, for anxiety in autism?
Generally, this is what I'm saying. Generally, risperidone is a very, very effective medication for all these factors. But for hyperactivity, at times I feel then we have to think of atomoxetine or methylphenidate. That is also been very often given in these children. But sometimes they do side effects with these medications. So risperidone is the most effective medication in my practice, which I've seen.
And any comment on aripiprazole?
Aripiprazole, rarely I give. This is what I'm saying. I'm most of the time things, because probably in my practice I get very young children, 1.5, 2, and preferably we give very less medication, and generally till 3 years of age we try not to give, 2 to 3 years avoid. But if it is too much of destruction or disruptive behavior, then risperidone, I feel very, very comfortable with the risperidone.
Ma'am, can behavioral therapy also improve the core features of autism?
Yes, it is the for core features mainly. We need to understand the problem is with the social communication. The child is not being able to understand. So behavior intervention is for the core features mainly, and restricted and repetitive behaviors. So we have by behavior modification, you work on the behavior on the core features, and that will lead to the functional improvement in a child.
Okay. Ma'am, there is another question, that is it wise to label a child with speech regression whose parents report loss of the speech and language milestone at some point of the child's development?
I didn't get the question, sorry.
The question means to ask that, is it wise to label a child with speech regression whose parents report loss of speech and language milestone at some point of child's development? So probably from the question I meant the
regression.
They want to ask whether can speech regression be normal? Do you want to always attribute it to autism?
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, whenever we take history, it is very important to make sure that is it a regression or is it just the, for example, parent will tell you he was not even 1 year, he was already saying mama and papa. He used to say at 9 months mama papa, so which is not possible. What was the milestone at that time? So you should be familiar with normal milestone. A child at 9 months speaking is first 8 months monosyllable, bisyllables, and by 1 year he starts meaningful speech. So whatever he was speaking was not meaningful, and the meaning, and if he says at 80 now at 15 months he's not speaking, that means he has not achieved the milestone. It is not regression. So make sure that there was an actual regression. And most of the time in history we would say that in autistic regression also is also at times is very dicey, because parents would say that a child was speaking 2-3 words meaningfully at the age of 15 months, and that now at 2 years he was not speaking. If I ask what was he speaking, he'll say ke, mama, papa. So then you have to ask, did he used to say mama to mama only, or he was generally speaking mama to everyone? नहीं, वो तो सबको मामा बोलता था. सबको मामा बोलना is not a meaningful thing. मम्मा को मामा बोलता था, तो उससे हम पूछें कि मम्मा को, हम पूछते थे मम्मा कहाँ है, तो ये बताता था मम्मा कहाँ है. Like he was able to correlate the language, receptive as well as the expressive. He was able to make the word mama, but actually he knew what was mama mean. So आपको पहले you have to make sure that the speech was attained, and then he has lost. So till that time you're not sure, you will not say that the speech has regressed. Okay.
One interesting question is, in DSM-5 criteria, what is the age for early developmental period?
Early.
We can't hear you, ma'am. Hello. Ranjit, you're there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I think we temporarily lost Dr. Praveen's connection. Can you, Ranjit, can you share your screen and tell the answers of the quiz?
I think it's already shared. Can you see it?
Okay, Ranjit, you can carry on.
Yeah. So the first question is, name this boy. The first boy was diagnosed with infantile autism. So he has grown into an adult and he is leading almost a productive life. So his name is Donald Gray Triplett. Leo Kanner is the first psychiatrist who coined this term. Not a part of DSM-5 criteria for ASD. Persistent deficits, restricted behavior, all these are 3 are normal. Need not manifest even before the social demands exceed limited. The answer is D. Pick the odd man out. So we have 3 persons with autism. This is Professor Nash. He is schizophrenia. So the answer is John Nash. MMR vaccine is associated with development of autism. Answer is no. Male is to female ratio in ASD 4:1. Not a treatable cause of autism. Creatine transporter defect. Creatine deficiency syndromes has 3 categories. Under this specific subtype, creatine transporter deficiency is not treatable. 12-month-old boy, speech delay, MCHAT score is 2. Next step. MCHAT score 2 comes under very low. That means you have to just follow developmental surveillance. Match the following. Savant syndrome is prodigal skill. Happy puppet is Angelman. Heller's dementia. Childhood dysangling disorder. High functioning autism. Asperger. Autistic regression. Behavioral EEG. This EEG shows this appearance. First line treatment. This is Landau-Kleffner syndrome. AEDs plus steroids. True about recurrence risk. Which of the following is true about DSM-5 criteria? DSM allows comorbid diagnosis of ASD with ADHD. Which of the following is incorrect regarding evaluation of autism? First line investigation includes karyotype and Fragile X in males and MECP in females. Not a red flag sign for suspected autism. No single word by 12 months. It should be 18 months. Thank you. Shall we announce the results, sir? I think ma'am is back.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, ma'am. Hi.
Sorry. Now on the phone. Actually, my net is disconnected.
No problem. I think we are almost. No problem.
Is it? Yeah.
We
I'm fine. I'm fine with this.
We were done with almost all the questions. So,
okay. If anything
Ranjit, do you want to announce the winners?
Yeah, yes, sir. So the first place goes to Dr. Arunath Vishwalingam from University of Colombo. I think he got the first place last time also.
Oh, congratulations.
Dr. Satya, Junior Resident Pediatrics from AIIMS. Second place.
Congratulations.
Third place is Dr. Naga Shravani. She is an IAP fellow in developmental pediatrics from Savita Medical College, Chennai.
Oh, great, great. So congratulations to all the winners. So yeah, Dr. Praveen ma'am, thank you very much. It was a wonderful talk. We really enjoyed, and the talk was very, very concise, and the questions were answered very crisply. So on behalf of Association of Child Neurology, we would like to thank Dr. Praveen Suman for delivering an excellent talk and conducting an excellent question and answer session. So with this note, we will end the meeting and call it a day, and we'll meet all of you on the next Friday. Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you, Ram. And thank you, Dr. Praveen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.